just want to start from the beginning, Drew. So, where are you from?
Yeah, I was born at Princess Mary's Hospital in Newcastle. So, yeah, lived in Newcastle most of my life. Apart from spent some time in Leeds and spent 7 years in the US. But apart from that, yeah, spent all my time in Newcastle really.
So, born into a normal family with mom, dad, brothers, sisters. Have you got any siblings?
Yeah, I've got an older brother, Jonathan, and a younger sister, Helena. So we're all within, like, because my brother was a year older than me and my sister's a year younger. So we're all pretty close together.
And what was childhood like? What were you doing as a kid? What sort of temperament did you have then, Drew?
Yeah. The older I get, I realised I had a fairly privileged childhood. Lived in Gosforth, and there was a lot of like wildlife and stuff nearby. There's a field right outside my house, so I just used to spend, pretty much the whole summer holiday playing football there or going into the woods, making dens, stuff like that. And very active, outdoorsy sort of childhood, and had my older brother to play football with, and my sister to, used to get up to all sorts of different stuff. Just, yeah, playing outside, bike riding, all sorts of stuff like that. So, yeah, the older I get and the way I see the world now, I realise that it's kind of a good time to grow up in the 90s. You don't really see kids out and about these days. So, yeah, I'm glad that I'm not stuck playing computer games like the kids are nowadays. Being out and about in the wilderness is something that I really cherish now, and I look back at it.
So you mentioned privilege as well. How do you see it as privileged? Are you just seeing it as like we didn't want for anything, or kind of what was your social life as well around it? Did you get everything you wanted as a kid? What was Christmases like?
Yeah, I mean, we weren't like massively spoilt or anything, but had mum and dad, lived in a nice, safe area. Just yeah, kind of middle class. My dad worked for Bell Trucks, who was a Mercedes dealer. So we were always driving around in Mercedes and stuff like that, a different one every week it seemed, because he was getting different company cars and stuff like that. So and very supportive family as well. Like when we took up running and stuff, my mum used to take us to training and all the races, and my mum and dad always used to sort of be there to support us. So like you just take it for granted when you're a kid, but then when you grow up, you realize that not everyone's that lucky to have a supportive sort of family around them. And then just, yeah, lots of friends on the estate and supportive grandparents and stuff. So yeah, I realized I was really lucky in a way.
I suppose when you're surrounded by like-minded people, the same kind of kids, the same kind of lifestyle, it just becomes normal, doesn't it? So it's sort of that's what you do. And what were your activities? Were you sporty as a kid?
Yeah, like I say, we always used to just be out and about, playing outside. It was back in the day when you just used to, get out on your bike, knock on your mates' doors, see people wanted to come play football or go into the woods, build a den, go on a bike ride, and just seemed a lot more freedom. People were a lot less paranoid, I think, those days about, the safety of it all. So yeah, just the summer holidays, it was like get up in the morning and come back for your lunch, then straight back out again and playing football till basically the sun went down, because there was a big green right outside my house, so my parents could just look out the window and see that we're there, and just really active. And I just never stopped really, just always wanting to be outside playing something or other, sometimes causing a bit of trouble, but nothing too crazy.
Any kind of crazy stories from when you were a kid? Any kind of learning moments from that?
I seemed to get injured quite a bit. There's like split my eyelid open once. I was on the school bus on the way back from a school trip to Marlish Farm, and didn't have seatbelts on the coaches or anything back then. So a kid bought a sheep or something from Marlish Farm, little plastic sheep, and he dropped it on the floor. So like I bent down to pick it up, and the bus stopped suddenly, and I just slid along the floor of the bus eye first, and got a massive slit in my eyelid and had to go to hospital. But on the way out the bus, there was like a helper from the school who was kind of an elderly lady, maybe late 60s, 70s, and she was picked me up to take me off the bus, and she actually fell off the bus, broke her hip, dropped me. So that was pretty traumatic, I guess, for her and me. So yeah, I had to get a big eye patch on my eye, and unfortunately, she had to retire after that. So I felt a bit guilty about that, even though I guess it probably wasn't my fault. But I always seem to be getting in some sort of situation where I ended up in A&E, split my chin open, split my hand open, stuff like that. But I guess that just came with being active and sort of getting out there and playing outside a lot, playing on bikes and stuff.
So you didn't really see yourself as accident prone. You just thought that's just something that happened.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, my sister was probably worse than me. She was in A&E so much that I think the hospital were probably nearly ready to call social services on my mum because she was accident prone. But yeah, I guess it was just like playing out all the time. I guess when you're a kid, you're bound to get into the odd scrape where you get injured, but no broken bones or anything at least.
I suppose the more you do, the more you're active, the more chances are that something's going to happen to you as well. So, I mean, what was school like as well? Were you good? Did you get into school? What was it like?
Yeah, I think if I was a kid now, I'd probably get diagnosed with ADHD or something like that, which, because I couldn't really behave. It wasn't an environment which I was particularly good in, like being in a classroom and stuff. And I, I think I struggled at an early age with like writing and all that sort of stuff. I was a slow developer. So I think because I was struggling, I maybe acted out a little bit. And my brother, he was in the year above me and he was really good at school. And I was often getting compared to him by the teachers, which I guess isn't that healthy when you're not doing that well and they're saying, "Oh, your brother was way better than you," sort of thing. But yeah, I managed to scrape through without too much trouble. I got into trouble way more than my brother and my sisters, but sorry, my brother and my sister. But yeah, for the most part, I managed to scrape through, and I always managed to kind of blag my way through school. And was never going to be an A student, but I kind of managed to blag my way through with like C's and B's and stuff.
Any relationships back then? What music were you into? Any groups you got into? What was, because you said you got ADHD, so you must be bouncing around, kind of doing sports, doing this, doing that. What was your teenage years like?
Yeah, so when I was about 16, I got into Blink 182 and like the kind of American skater punk sort of scene. So I was listening to all the like skater punk bands, and but Blink 182 were probably my favorite. They were the most kind of mainstream out of all of them that I used to listen to. But me and my mates used to go to a lot of gigs and stuff. That was kind of our version of going out clubbing, I guess. We weren't the sort of guys that would go to the big market and go clubbing. We just used to, yeah, go to different kind of punk rock shows of kind of like the second wave of punk and ska and all that sort of stuff. So that was really good. And we made our own band, even though I didn't really know how to play any instruments. We just formed a band, and then yeah, we kind of learned the instruments afterwards, which I think if you look at bands like the Ramones and stuff like that from back in the day, they weren't good musicians by any stretch of the imagination. So we just kind of followed their lead and used to play quite a few gigs and stuff. And it was just a good laugh, really. We never thought we were going to get a record deal or anything, but we used to spend a lot of time doing that, practicing. And yeah, played a couple of gigs around different places. Played one in Hawick on the borders of Scotland, which I think we got paid for that one. So that was probably the highlight of our career. And yeah, apart from that, yeah, I think it kept me out of trouble being a runner, because I was a runner from the age of about 8. So I always kind of had to focus on training and doing races and stuff. So I never got into drugs or anything like that. Just too much drinking, which I think it's par for the course in Newcastle. Just that culture of going out and getting drunk. So
You feel obviously you've got loads of energy, ADHD, you're running and you're in a band, but the running kind of kept you on the straight and narrow a little bit because
yeah,
you knew
definitely.
you wanted to do that. Was it always a
Yeah.
thing you wanted to do, like run?
Yeah, well, I got into it because my brother was really naturally talented at it, and he won the Newcastle Championship when we were like 9 or something. And then I kind of always looked up to him, so I followed his lead on that. And he was was winning everything, and I was just kind of in the background. And then when I got to about 16, I started doing quite well as well. And then all these guys who'd been talking to my brother all the time said, "Oh, I didn't realize you had a brother," even though I'd been on the running scene for about 8 years or something. So I started improving, and I came fifth in the English Schools Championship, which is kind of like the equivalent of the Olympics, really, when you're in high school. I was racing against future Olympians and stuff like that. So I started becoming pretty good at running, and I took it seriously, but I was trying to burn the candle on both ends, going out and getting really drunk and then trying to train and, being an elite runner at the same time was quite hard. And for a few years, I probably drank way too much, went down to Leeds to train and stuff. And the first year I was there, I was drinking like 4 or 5 times a night, like with the students and stuff, 4 or 5 times a week with the students. And yeah, my training really suffered from that. But
So is that when did you go to uni, and then is that when it kind of sort of took a back seat, or?
yeah, for the first year, and then I started training with a really good coach called Wilf Paish, who was he'd been the Olympic coach for South Africa, and he'd coached Peter Elliott, who was he'd run in the Olympics and stuff, was a really good runner from Yorkshire. So he coached me, and I kind of got good enough to get a scholarship to the US, which was my big sort of ambition at the time. So
You wanted to be a runner, professional runner?
well, I kind of wanted to get the most out of it that I could have, and to be a professional is really, really hard, and you might get like 25 grand a year from the national lottery or something like that if you're going to be in the Olympics. And I think I was talented, but I maybe wasn't quite as talented as the guys who were going to the Olympics. Probably the equivalent would be, maybe I wouldn't be a Premier League player, I'd be like a championship player, or lower level Premier League player. And if it was the equivalent to football, but with running, there's so little money out there for runners, that kind of the best thing I could have got out of it really was a scholarship to the US. So went over there to a university called Adams State College, and that was in Colorado. And they paid for everything, paid for all your tuition, your accommodation, stuff like that. And it was just, yeah, it was amazing. You're running with elite athletes every day. You've got sort of 30 guys that you're training with, and all your mates, and then you push each other along, and it just makes it so much easier when you've got all those guys to train with. And we used to fly around the country to different events, and we were in Division 2, which is it's kind of more on the budget than the standard of the university, because we were quite a small uni with a small budget. So we were in Division 2, and it had slightly different eligibility criteria, because I was a little bit older when I went out there. So that's how I had to go to Division 2. But yeah, we used to take on all the big Division 1 universities and would beat them a lot of the time and stuff. And yeah, cross country, running 100 miles a week in the fall season, as they called it out there. And then just short break at Christmas, straight into indoor track, and then a 1 week break, and then straight to outdoor track. So it never really stopped. You didn't really get a chance to take time off and have a holiday. It was just intense. I was there for 4.5 years.
So how old were you when you were over there?
I went over when I was 23. That's why I had to go to Division 2, because there's eligibility criteria. So yeah, I went out there when I was 23, and I stayed for 4.5 years at the uni. And then I worked as an assistant coach there, and then I got a job in Texas as an assistant coach at a big university out there, Division 1 university. So it
Was that the plan all along, or were you just going with the flow on this time?
Yeah, a bit of both. It was not really the plan till I got out there, and then I saw the opportunities that they've got out there for sport, because it's not really a job that exists in the UK, a professional coach at a university. But then I kind of saw the opportunities and decent pay considering what you're doing, and I kind of saw what my coach did and thought, yeah, that would be a pretty decent job. So the last couple of years of my degree, I kind of started focusing on that for a future. It just, it was a bit more difficult with the visa situation and stuff, because it's quite hard to get a visa out there. But thankfully, yeah, I got a visa, and in 2013, I started that job in Texas at a university called Abilene Christian University. And I kind of inherited not particularly good team, and just kind of had to work with them to try and improve them, and trying to create a culture of winning, really, and culture of trying to get better, because it was a bit like, I don't know, there wasn't that much ambition when I got there. And yeah, so I started doing that and it was going really well. And then in 2014, I broke my neck. So that was the end of my coaching career. So I was just there for like a year and a half.
So let's talk about that kind of. So you're a motivated guy. You're kind of going in there with ambition to try and change this team around and get them
Yeah.
motivated and get them better. So that's your attitude, that's your mentality, because you've been there, done that. So that really helps with the coaching aspect, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because like the university I'd been at, like we won so much. It was, in the time I was there, I won 4 individual national titles, and the team titles we won loads. It was like at least 3 in cross country, 1 in indoors and 1 in outdoors. And like no one at Adams State had ever won an outdoor team title before. And then I was captain of the team, and we won one in 2012. So that was like a big achievement for me and for the university and all the guys on the team. And I was coming from that environment to like Abilene Christian, which was a really successful uni in the past, but it had had a few down years, and the coach who'd been there before me, I don't think he'd done that good a job. So they were kind of very low standard at the time. So it's kind of about trying to recruit new athletes, but I got there so late that we didn't even have time to do that. So we just kind of had to work with the athletes that we had and trying to create, culture of improvement and like excellence, which I'd experienced as an athlete, like, eating healthy, not going out drinking. Like we weren't allowed to go out drinking, pretty much full stop. And trying to create that culture there. And yeah, we started improving quite a bit as a team. And then I had my accident, and yeah, that was the end of it, pretty much.
So let's talk about the accident. I mean, so at what time was this? Were you still teaching at the time? Were you over there?
Yeah, so I was in a place called Abilene. It was classed as the buckle of the Bible Belt in West Texas, which it's not really my scene. The job was good, but that wasn't really my scene, the whole Christian thing. But my girlfriend at the time, she was in Denver, which is about, I think it was like 11-hour drive away. So on the Thursday night, we'd had a barbecue with the team and everything. And then I left at maybe like 9 p.m. on the Thursday night to drive 11 hours through the night, drove to Denver. Got there on the Friday, and then I think we spent the Friday together, me and my girlfriend. And then on the Saturday, I think it was 20th of September 2014, I was kind of training for a triathlon because I'd finished my running career, and like I was getting to the age where I knew I wasn't going to improve anymore as a runner. So I wanted a new challenge. So I thought I'll do some triathlons, something a bit different. So I was training for a triathlon. We're at a place called Cherry Creek Reservoir, and my girlfriend was reading like Harry Potter, I think. We're on this like artificial beach at the reservoir, and I just ran into the water to go for a swim, and kind of, the water was up to my thighs, so I thought it was safe to dive in. So I dove in, but I think there's like a raised sandbar that I hit, and just loud bang, and then just a ringing in my ears, and I was still conscious, but I couldn't move, so I couldn't really work out what happened. I thought a boat had like hit me and was still on top of me, because I was just under the water, face down, just kind of unable to move. And then I started thinking, well, my girlfriend's reading a book. If she hasn't seen me, no one else is going to see me, because there's no one else around. So I was like, oh God, I'm probably going to die here. And it wasn't so much like your life flashing before you, it was more like, oh, this is embarrassing, I'm going to die like this. And then I started thinking about my parents and stuff, like, oh, what are they going to think? And like everyone I know, they're going to know that I've died in such an embarrassing manner. And then luckily, after it's probably only about 30 seconds, but seemed like a long time when I didn't know when my next breath was going to be. My ex-girlfriend, she pulled me out of the water and kind of dragged me onto the shoreline, and I couldn't feel anything from pretty much my neck down at all. So I was saying, oh, they were saying, oh, we'll call an ambulance. Some woman came to help, and I was saying, we'll call an ambulance. And I was like, nah, it's all right. I'll be okay in a second. I'm just in shock. But I think I was just in denial because I couldn't believe what had just happened, really. And then I thought my hands were like this, and then I looked down and they were like that. I was like, oh no, like I'm paralyzed pretty much. But I thought it was just going to be like a temporary thing at the time. I think denial, and then
So you couldn't feel anything at all?
no, not at all. Like completely just switched off pretty much.
So what did you hit? I mean, you mentioned the sandbar. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
even know what that is. What is that?
Yeah, well, I think it was just like, rather than being as deep as I thought it was, I think it was just like a mound of slightly like higher mound of sand. So it was shallower than I thought. And I think I
Did you
can't,
go to dive in or something?
yeah, like I
that?
ran in. I didn't like dive off anything. It was like up to my thighs, the water. So I just did like a shallow dive. But like instead of hitting water like I was expecting, I just hit the bottom basically. And
On your head?
I think I had a bit of a graze on my chin. So I'm not sure if I like hit it and my neck bent that way, or if I hit it and my neck bent that way. It was probably that way because of the graze on my chin. And like I had a chipped tooth as well, I think. But I think like it hyperextended the neck, and then the fourth and fifth vertebrae like shattered, and then a bit of the vertebrae penetrated. Sorry. Then a bit of the vertebrae penetrated the spinal cord, and it's about 70% damage. The spinal cord, it wasn't severed, so it's classed as a incomplete injury. So a complete injury is where you completely sever it, and incomplete's where it's like partially severed. But I think when it first happened, there's also like swelling and shock, so that's why I couldn't feel anything at all. Like now I can feel, like I can feel if someone's touching my legs and stuff because it's an incomplete injury. But at the time, yeah, I couldn't move anything, couldn't feel anything.
I mean, that moment there, it's just a flippant thing which we've all done,
Yeah.
just to dive in. I mean, looking back, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's been a lot of frustration over the years, and just like, oh man, I wish I knew getting something that like getting it slightly wrong could just have this much impact. But at the time when it first initially happened, I think I was still in denial and in shock, and I was thinking, oh God, I'm gonna have to do like 6 months of rehab here till I can walk again. It's like, like I never pictured that I'd never be able to walk or even use my hands again. And it wasn't until like, I mean, when the paramedics came, I was like cracking jokes and stuff. I think I was just in denial, and I don't know, I'm fairly laid back anyway, but
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
how are you supposed to know?
Yeah.
You just, because it's never happened to you, you've never
Yeah.
experienced this. And also, you go back as a kid and you said, oh, I've had a
Yeah,
few accidents, so
exactly, yeah.
this was probably not something you were expecting, you know?
Yeah, and like at that point in my life, everything was going really well, my job and stuff. So maybe I was a bit overconfident, thinking, oh yeah, I'm untouchable, everything's going great. Then all of a sudden it just like slammed down to earth, slammed back to reality. But yeah, like I was in the ambulance and they were sort of saying, which hospital do you want to go to? I was like, well, the closest one, like the best one, because in America it's obviously all medical insurance, and like I didn't realize at the time, but it depended on what type of insurance I had as to which hospital I went to. And luckily with my job, I had really good insurance, which, I mean, I didn't see the value in having good insurance at the time, because in England, if someone had offered you an extra 10 grand a year or medical insurance, you'd just be like, well, take the money. But over there, like as part of the perks of the job, you got really good medical insurance, which I was like, oh, that's a bit of a waste. I'd rather have the money. But then obviously when the accident happened, I realized how important it is. And so they took me to hospital, and like straight away they're like, we're gonna have to shove a catheter in. I was like, can you just wait till I've like gone to sleep or something till you do that? But they did that. I couldn't feel it. And then I think my ex-girlfriend had to ring my parents and stuff, and I was like saying, I'm okay, I'll be all right. And then I saw the surgeon. He told me I'd never walk again.
What, straight away?
Yeah, and I was just like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, sort of thing. I just thought, there's no way that can be true. And then I went through surgery, which was about, I think it was like 12 hours or something. And then they put me in like sorry, I thought it was on airplane mode. I'll just quickly put it on airplane mode. Sorry. Right. So they put me in induced coma for like 3 days. So when I woke up, my mum and dad and my brother were there. So I was really confused. I was like, how have they got here so quickly? And I was a bit like still embarrassed, like, oh, it's not that big a deal. You didn't have to come all this way for that. But like I say, I think I was just a bit in denial and stuff, and I had like breathing apparatus and tubes everywhere, like feeding tubes, tubes up my nose, all sorts of stuff. And they're sort of saying, like, your lungs are, they're not working really, because like my diaphragm was paralyzed as well. So I had like oxygen masks on, but they said like your oxygen sats are getting lower and lower, and we're gonna have to put a trachea in. And I was like, nah, you're not doing that. And like that went on for like maybe half the day, and then eventually like they sent my brother in, and they're like, just had a big meeting, and they're saying you're basically gonna die if you don't do it. So I was like, oh, for God's sake, all right, we'll do it. So they had to put like, you know, one of those trachea things in, and had me on a ventilator, which was basically breathing for me. So that was like horrific, basically, because it kept getting like clogged with mucus and gunk and stuff. So they had to like stick tubes in the hole down into your lungs and like suck out all the mucus. And every time they did it, it was just like horribly painful. And it's like, I think I pulled the muscles in my neck from, so every time they did it, it's like, ooh. So I think I pulled all these muscles in my neck, and I got pneumonia a couple of times, and it's just like a constant battle with the lungs initially. And they had me on this medication called Dilaudid or something, which is really strong painkiller. So they just kept asking me what my pain level was, and I don't even think I was in any pain, to be honest. So I just kept saying 10. So they kept just giving me loads of this drug, and yeah, I was just like totally hallucinating and stuff in the hospital. So every day, like I thought they'd changed my room. So one minute I thought I was in a sort of ski log cabin, then I was in like a cowboy themed room and a spaceship themed room. And there was one day I was sleeping on the bed, and I was like, I thought there was I was sleeping on an inflatable donkey, and there was like a little cowboy doll next to me. And I was like, oh, that's nice. They've kind of put him there to keep me company. And yeah, it turns out that Dilaudid stuff's just like one hell of a drug. And that's the only time I've ever like hallucinated like that. But it was so weird because I said to like my mum and dad, sort of, it was pretty good, that hospital. Kept moving me around to all those themed rooms. And they're like, what are you talking about? You've never moved out of this bed the whole time you were there. So that helped get me through that drug. And
So did you realize when you were in hospital as well, what was the point of realization? Was it your brother coming in? Was it more the times people were talking to you? Was it all of the other issues like getting the trach in, your lungs, the pneumonia? Was it a series of things? Did you start like having like different thoughts and doubts about you're going to walk again or not?
I think I was still in shock, in denial for a while. Because after that hospital, they moved me to a place called Craig Hospital. That's one of the best rehab units in America, and it was amazing. I had my own room, and it's like a 5-star hotel, basically. All the nurses were amazing. And I think they said it cost about 2 million for me to be there for, I think it's 3 months, because the insurance company didn't want to pay for you to be there for very long. So it was really intense. But I'd moved there, and they took me off that Dilaudid stuff. And I was basically a heroin addict coming off heroin. I was just like throwing up every morning, so I couldn't really do the physio and stuff that they needed me to do for the first couple of weeks. So I kind of missed out on 2 weeks of the 3 months that I was in there for. But But once I got going, it was like really intense physio. They had all sorts of different stuff, like weird robotic arms attached to computer games that you could play to try and increase your strength. And they had lung physios coming in sort of 4 times a night to give me steroids to help my lungs. And
And what was your thought process throughout all of this as well, Drew? Because you're coming, I mean, you just brushed past like, yeah, I was just coming off like heroin.
yeah. Well, I didn't
It's-
realize at the time that's what it was. It was making me ill. I just thought, oh, I broke my neck. And yeah, but
You just thought it was something else that's happening.
yeah, I
Let's
didn't
deal with
think about
this.
it till later. But they're like,
You seem to
oh
deal
yeah,
with these things just as and when they come. You know, it doesn't really
yeah.
affect you much, though.
It was like, definitely like the worst thing about the accident was like the time in hospital. Like the accident itself, it's not too traumatic. It didn't particularly hurt, and like yeah, nearly drowned, but it wasn't as traumatic as it could be in a way. But the time in hospital was so traumatic. They're like, right, you know, today we're gonna put a camera up your urethra and have a look at your bladder and stuff, and that was horrific. And then, okay, we're gonna change your trachea, and like every day it was something that was like the worst thing that had ever happened to me, sort of thing. And it was just really like mentally exhausting, but I was still had loads of people from like my friends from uni and pretty much everyone I'd ever met in America like came and supported me. Every night I had either my mum or dad, my brother, my girlfriend, family member like sleeping in the room with me, because it was like a private room with an extra bed. So I don't know, it's like weird feeling all the love and support. I don't know how people could have done it without that, because like I still had a positive outlook, and I was setting myself like smart goals every day to, right, today I'm gonna, because I couldn't even lift my arm at first. I had to like scaffolding kind of holding my arm so I could drive the chair. But then eventually it was like, right, I'm gonna be able to drive my chair myself, a lap of the ward or something like that. So just setting little goals. But yeah, it was mentally and physically fatiguing, because everything was just like I say, it's like the worst day of my life every day, having to like suction gunk out my lungs like 50 times a day. And then you eventually get to bed, and then they've got to roll you over every 2 hours to make sure you don't get a pressure sore. And then you eventually go back to sleep, and then you wake up and the physio's there and like time for your steroids in your lungs. So yeah, it's really hard, but it was a really positive place. And there's a few guys who were sort of in at the same time as me with similar injuries that I became friends with. But one of them ended up like walking out of the hospital. So I thought, well, he's had a similar injury to me. I can do that. It might just take a bit more time. So I was still quite optimistic and, you know, maybe delusional when I left the hospital. And it wasn't really till like the next year afterwards that I started realizing I'm not getting any better here. It's like no matter what I try, I'm not like improving. I'm not gaining use of my hands again or any movement or anything like that. So time in the hospital, there's so much positivity and kind of hope for the future. It wasn't really till after I left that I kind of realized, actually, yeah, this isn't gonna go the way I thought it was gonna go. So that's kind of when I started getting a bit depressed, mainly when I got out of the hospital.
So you've been in hospital, then you went to the specialist hospital, getting physio treatment and stuff like that. So from the injury to getting out, and maybe is that a year later when things are starting to kind of seep in? Was that a year since the accident, pretty much? Did it take a year before it started like
Yeah, it's
getting a bit
maybe
down?
like 6 months after I started. Like it went from having this big support network and having all your nurses and everything you needed, like everything set up for you. It's like leaving the hospital, and I had to move to this. It's kind of like a fancy, like rich old people lived there. It was like a fancy apartment complex, because that was the only place I could find that had like the accessibility that I needed. So that was really expensive, and I just moved in there with my ex, and it was just really hard for both of us. Like she was having to like take care of me by herself, and I had some carers that came in, but in America you don't get any of the support you get here for care. So I had to like pay them myself. My money was just running out. There's like loads of insurance bills all the time.
So
And all
you
that.
were paying for all of this yourself?
Yeah, like when we got out, yeah. And the pressure on like me and my ex-girlfriend, like the relationship had changed from you know, what it was before the accident to what it was after. And, you know, I was really frustrated and depressed, and I took a lot of the anger out on her, and we're just arguing all the time. So eventually we decided, like, yeah, we should probably split up. And I mean, we remained friends and stuff, but it's just kind of a mutual thing where we realized, like, you know, this isn't good for anyone. I didn't want her to kind of feel stuck with me and just stay with me because she felt bad about the situation. So we split up eventually, and then like, I just needed to be close to family and stuff. So eventually I came home in like 2015 December.
So how old were you
2015.
then?
So I had my 30th birthday in hospital, so I would have been like 31 when I came back to Newcastle. And that was pretty horrific, to be honest, because like, we flew back and they dropped my wheelchair off the plane, smashed it to smithereens, and then like, as I got to Glasgow airport, the porter just, can I swear in this or no?
You can't, I can bleep it out.
Yeah, well, I arrived in Glasgow airport, and the porter just brought my like £20,000 wheelchair and like 3 bin bags, and he was like, your chair's fucked, mate. And like, that was my welcome back to the UK. So I had like a little manual wheelchair that was really uncomfortable and stuff. So I had to, first couple of weeks in Newcastle, I had that, and we're going back and forwards with the airline, which was Icelandair. And they basically offered us, I think, 1,100 quid for the chair, which was like £20,000 that I'd got through insurance, specially made for me and everything. And we just said to them, are you sure that's your final offer? Do you want to go down this road, sort of thing? And like, yeah, that's our policy. So eventually we just kind of posted it on social media. This is what's happened. This is a picture of my dad put a thing up saying, this is a picture of how my son's wheelchair arrived when he arrived in Glasgow. And it kind of went viral, so it got like 10,000 shares or something like that. So like, my mates were hammering the CEO of Icelandair on LinkedIn and stuff. Shira retweeted. It was like in the national paper in the UK, in America, in Iceland, and like, shares of Icelandair went down a little bit because it's quite a small company. So
Over your chair?
yeah. So the next day, got the CEO of Icelandair on the phone, sort of saying, Mr. Graham, what can we do to sort of make this go away? And I was like, well, I just want a wheelchair, like, as good as my other one. And then he said, right, is anything else? I should have just asked them for some money as well, but it's like, no, just get me the wheelchair. So we just quoted them the best wheelchair that was available at the time, which is this chair that I've still got, and that was like nearly 10 years ago. And yeah, they just put the money in the account within like 5 minutes and just said, please delete everything off social media. So I got like a top of the range chair, which, yeah, I had like 8 weeks or some 12 weeks even without a proper chair. So that was pretty traumatic, getting back to England, and yeah, that's happening. And then it's the middle of winter as well, and I hadn't been taking that many painkillers in the US, but because of the change in weather, like, Colorado's really dry, you're at high altitude. But I think it was the humidity in the air over here. I was just in loads of pain all the time. And then I had like a care agency coming in, which, I mean, I don't want to talk badly about the carers and stuff, but like, you're just getting like different carers all the time, and some of them seemed like dodgy characters, and they just didn't want to be there as well. Like, when someone's taking care of you, you can tell they just don't really care. It was just quite depressing. So for that first 6 months I was back in the UK, I was like the lowest I've ever been. I basically kind of wanted to commit suicide, really. But if it wasn't for my family and stuff, supportive family, I wouldn't have seen any light at the end of the tunnel. But then it's maybe about summer 2016, I met my now wife and kind of came up with the idea for Gym Possible. And that was kind of what got me back to thinking positive rather than just like dwelling on what I couldn't do. I started focusing on, okay, what can I do, and what can I do for myself to kind of move forward.
So you come back, where were you living as well at this time, Drew?
That was another thing that made it hard. I was like living with my parents, and like how I'd taken a lot of my frustration out on my ex. I was kind of, you know, taking a lot of my frustration out on my parents, and you know, living at home after living by yourself for years, and being in your 30s living at home wasn't ideal. So I lived with them, and they were doing the best. They did amazingly, but I was just in a really bad place. So I was arguing with them a lot and stuff.
But also, you've gone from like this hyper, super active guy
Yeah.
with ambition and drive and motivation and all these things, running teams, running people, to the situation you're in. What's exactly going through your head, Drew?
Yeah, I couldn't really see a future at the time. It was hard to see a future where I could ever be happy. I just was like, well, my identity, a huge part of my identity was, I guess, the physicality, the being a runner. Like if someone had said to me in America, like, I'll give you £1,000 to go and run a marathon, could have woke me up in the middle of the night and I could have run a marathon in like, I don't know, 2 hours 30 or something, and then climb a mountain, just do whatever I wanted, and then all of a sudden I just like need help for everything. And that's something I really hated, having to ask for everything, like from brushing your teeth to eating to going to the toilet, showering, just everything. You kind of lose all your independence and kind of feel like you lose your dignity a bit. So that was partly like what made me depressed. But yeah, just not being able to get out there and be outside, because with my level of injury as well, because I'm not moving at all pretty much. I can move my arms a bit, but you're always cold. Like if it's below like 20 Celsius, I'm cold. So I just like in Newcastle in the winter, and I couldn't really go outside without being freezing. And I wanted to be, outside doing stuff, but yeah, I couldn't. I was just watching terrible daytime TV, and yeah, it's a bad time really.
So you couldn't do any activity. There was nothing you can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, well, I rented an FES bike, which is a bike we've got them in the gym now. So it's got a motor inside it which pedals your legs for you, and then you put electrodes on like, say your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, and that gives you like electric shocks which cause your muscle to contract. So it's actually your muscles that are pedaling the bike. But and that was good. It was good rehab and stuff, but I still didn't feel like I was doing anything because it's more of a passive exercise. So I was sitting there doing that, but I wasn't getting the buzz of like actually exercising really. So I did that a lot, but then I met with a few guys from the region who'd had similar injuries to me, and I kind of was trying to get some info about what they do for like exercise and rehab and stuff. And I was just met with quite a lot of negativity, like, oh, well, I was told in the hospital I couldn't exercise, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. And then like comparing that to the guys I'd met in America that were like really upbeat and positive, and like going to these specialist gyms that were out there, because I used to go to quite a few specialist gyms after my accident, and I was like, well, you can, like, what about the specialist gyms? And they're like, there's nothing like that over here. And I just thought, well, if there isn't one, I've got to make it myself. So like me and my dad on the way back from one of those visits kind of started coming up with the idea for, initially it was called Pop-Up Gym, and the idea was to kind of take the equipment and pop up in different places around the region for people with spinal injuries and other disabilities. But then we actually ended up getting a gym in Gateshead, so we set up there, and that's kind of what got me out of my deepest depression, like having a project to work on and starting that. So we opened our first gym in 2018. So don't know if I answered your question there or not. I can't even remember what it was. But.
That's great. I mean, at what stage did you meet your wife as well, Drew? And how did you meet? Because it's sort of, obviously you're not out socially, so
Yeah.
at what point were you kind of starting to go out? Were you seeing people? Was it the Gym Possible thing? How did you kind of meet?
Yeah, so she was at uni because she's from Thailand, but she was doing a master's at Newcastle Uni. And yeah, I was in the house bored a lot, so I went on a lot of dating apps and stuff. So yeah, I actually went on a few dates with girls, and I was surprised by how little they cared about the situation, like the disability. Like, yeah, they seemed like, maybe would match with 100. Like this was back in the days of Tinder, where it was like the glory days before you have to pay and stuff. Apparently now it's like to get matches you got to pay and stuff. But this is like 2016, so you like match of 100 girls and maybe chat to 50 of them, and out of those 50, maybe like 5 of them would want to go on dates, or 10 of them or whatever. So I went on a few dates with different girls, and yeah, they seemed all right with it actually. It was just like, you know, when there's not that much chemistry, just didn't move forward. And I think that was both for them and for me. It wasn't like, you know, I was desperate just because I was in a wheelchair. But then I met my my wife. I nearly said my current wife there, but she'd kill me if I said that. But then I met my wife, and yeah, she just straight away she was fine with it, and I just got on, and yeah, just used to spend a lot of time together. And then as time went on, we just got closer and closer, and she ended up staying over at mine pretty much every night after work and stuff. And then she had to go to Australia for 2 years to work. So yeah, I had to do the long distance thing for a while. But then she moved back in, I think it was like late 2018, and we got married about 6 months after that. And yeah, we've been living together since, I think it was lockdown, and moved in together. And yeah, so it's going well.
So you just set up Gym Possible before then as well?
Yeah, so it set up as a charity in 2016, and then we like worked on fundraising. We did a lot of crowdfunding and different fundraisers, and we got a lot of equipment through that. And then in 2018, we actually opened the first gym, I think January 2018, and straight away it was pretty much full. We had about 50 members within like a couple of months, and it wasn't that big, so we quickly outgrew it. And then I think it was about 2019 we got offered a bigger gym. It was kind of a shared space, so we moved there. And then the pandemic happened, so I lost that space and kind of had to start from scratch again after the pandemic. So that was a pretty tough time. But
Did you get any funding or support, Drew, to set this up? You just said you kind of crowdfunded. I mean, was there
yeah,
nothing out there for you to kind of set it up?
we couldn't really get grants because a lot of grants wanted, like charity grants, wanted you to have been operating for a while first. So we didn't get any charity grants, and then like the council didn't give us anything. So yeah, we pretty much just had to like crowdfund and stuff to get it going.
Is there any other disability gyms in the area?
I think the closest one's probably the Matt Hampson Foundation, who we partner with now, and that's in Melton Mowbray. So there's a lot of like places where it's private physio that have some of the equipment we have, but they'll charge over 100 quid an hour where we charge 20 quid a month. So I wanted to set up a gym that was financially viable for people, but also had all the specialist equipment that I'd used in America, because that's where I kind of got the idea for all the specialist equipment and stuff. It was using it in America and seeing what worked and what didn't work. So yeah, like our slogan's making exercise accessible, and that's physically accessible to people with disabilities, but also financially accessible, because generally people who are disabled, like, they're probably more likely to have less money than someone who isn't disabled. A lot of the time they're on benefits, or can only work part-time. So I wanted to make it as cheap as possible, and I don't really like the model of, if you get a big payout because you've had a work-related injury or someone's crashed into you, you can use these private physios for 100 quid a pop. Well, what about everyone else? Because most people don't get big payouts. So I wanted to make it for everyone, really, with various physical disabilities. So that's kind of the model we went for. And we charge £20 a month, which helps us pay our staff and stuff, but it barely scratches the surface. It's grants and fundraising that is the main thing that keeps us going.
So obviously, clearly the Matt Hampson Foundation's vital for you.
Yeah, yeah, they've helped us from the start, really, to help finance it and help support us, because they're a much bigger charity than us, and they've got a sort of similar ethos as us. So they've, from day one, they've helped us a lot. And then we've had like small grants from different charitable funds and stuff, but we've never really had a big grant, apart from Irwin Mitchell had us as their Charity of the Year in 2018, it must have been, and that was like 25,000. So that's kind of what helped us survive the pandemic. But apart from that, we've not really had any huge grants or anything. So that's something we're kind of looking for at the moment, but it's just hard work.
So opening this business as well, Drew, I mean, what's it kind of done for you?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's given me something to focus on because I mean, if I didn't have the gym, I don't know what job I'd do, to be honest. I can't really picture a job that I could do or would want to do. So it's kind of created a job for me, but most importantly, it's created something that I can, I feel good about myself because I can see that it's helping people. And after my accident, there wasn't really that much that made me feel good about myself. So yeah, to be able to help people and get out of the house and see people and chat to people, because when something like this happens, it's quite easy to become sort of socially isolated. All my mates were at work and stuff when I was in the house all day watching Homes Under the Hammer or whatever it was. So yeah, it gives me a reason to get up in the morning, get out of the house, and it gives me something to focus on to try and do everything I can to improve the gym as much as possible to help other people. So yeah, it's and it gives me somewhere to exercise as well. Like the main aim is to help other people exercise, but it's also, I get to use the gym and get to stay fit as well.
So obviously you're staying fit. Have you done, I know you missed the running. Have you done any yourself? Have you been involved in any events? Because I know for a fact
Yeah.
you won't be able to stop doing that kind of thing, yeah?
Yeah. So like for the first few years, actually probably first 7 or 8 years after my accident, I just wanted nothing to do with running. I didn't want to watch it on TV. I didn't want to hear about it. And like some of my old running mates would come over and they'd be talking about running and stuff, and I wasn't that interested in it. But then last year I did the Great North Run, and it wasn't something I wanted to do, but I thought it might be a good fundraiser. So
So why didn't you want to do it?
I just thought I don't want to be the guy getting pushed around in a wheelchair, like with everyone feeling sorry for him and stuff. And it's not going to be the same as running. And I don't know, I just didn't like the idea of it. But then I was like, okay, for a fundraiser, I'll do it. And yeah, a bunch of my old running mates like agreed to do it. So yeah, they pushed me around, and it was actually like a really good buzz. It was an amazing day, and the most important thing is I was like with my mates having a good time, and my brother as well. And we did it in like 2 hours 1 minute because it was like dead hot, and one of the guys overheated, so I had to stop for a bit. And then kind of got some friends to do it again this year, some of the same guys, and then a few new guys. And well, like because we're ex-athletes, I think still pretty competitive. So started talking about like, oh, we're going to try and break 90 minutes and stuff. And we managed to sort of get our way to the very front of the start line because we've got an interview on BBC. So I had these VIP passes. So got right to the front of the start line and like went out really fast, and we're pretty much leading the Great North Run for the first 100 meters, which that was like as good a buzz as I've ever felt when I was running myself. And we're going fast as well. So like just feeling that speed and the wind in my hair and just overtaking people, dodging in and out of people. Like it was actually way more of a buzz than I thought it would be. And then Great North Run, the crowd's amazing as well. So the whole way around, people shouting and stuff. And
Did it feel like it took you back to when you were running before?
yeah, to a certain extent, like different, but a lot of the good stuff about running was still there, except it wasn't horribly painful while I was doing it. I guess I could kind of take a bit more of it in because when you're running, you're like totally in that zone and you can barely even hear people shouting your name and stuff. But being in the chair, I could kind of, yeah, have a bit of the buzz from running, but also kind of take in the sights and, the crowd and everything. So it's really good. And then we ended up finishing in 1 hour 26 and 8 seconds. And that was with a few technical faults with the wheelchair where we had to stop and a few things like that. So yeah.
Did your wheels fall off?
Yeah, 2 wheels fell off. Yeah, we had some caster wheels fall off. My feet fell off, so I had to duct tape them back on. And a few different things. I had a marshal trying to stop us go down the hill because he said it was too dangerous. So he ran in front of us and he was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So there's a few like choice words with him, but we managed to just blast straight past him. And yeah, but it was just like a real buzz coming down the finishing straight to everyone shouting and stuff. It was yeah, something I'd never experienced in running, because even though you may have that, you're like just so focused on getting to the finish line that you don't even notice it. So it's just really amazing. And
It must be good running with your pals again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, my brother pushed me over the finish line, and I had mates from when I was in America, mates from when I was in Leeds, mates from when I used to compete up here. And yeah, like all of us were absolutely buzzing for like a week afterwards. The group chat was just constantly just going off, sharing stuff. We're in the we're on like the main program of the BBC. We're on like the main page of the Great North Run and stuff. So it's great for Gym Possible for fundraising as well, because we've got the name out there and stuff. And I think we raised, like with our group, we raised over 10,000, and then with the Matt Hampson guys and Abby and Sam and the other guys from Gym Possible, I think the total was like 20,000 altogether. So yeah, it was just amazing. So we're already talking about doing it next year, but we're like looking at the world record for next year, which is pretty fast actually. So I don't know how realistic it is, but we're kind of looking at it. We're looking up faster wheelchairs and stuff like that. So yeah, the guys are excited, and so am I.
Just on a final note, Drew, you seem very optimistic and you just get on with it and you kind of power forward. Just to, if you're talking to somebody who's in a similar position to where you were, just maybe a little insight, a little, few pointers, bit of motivation.
Yeah, well, I think with a lot of disabled people, like you see a lot of stuff on social media where people are like crazy optimistic and seem happy all the time. And maybe I seem like that as well, but like behind the scenes, there's been times where I've been like really low and probably a bit horrible to like, some of the stuff I've said, like just with frustration and depression and anger. But yeah, I think you've just got to try and not lose yourself. Like it's only been probably this year that I've kind of come to terms with what's actually happened, and now I'm looking forward and I'm like, well, actually I can still have a good life even though I'm in a wheelchair. I've just not got to like let my spark that I used to have before the accident go. And maybe it did go at one time, but you've got to get it back and you've got to keep pushing forward. I fell asleep with my teeth like that one time. My wife started calling me a beaver. And then I was like, well, maybe I am a beaver, because beavers, they have to like engineer their own environment. They've got to like build something from scratch to suit, like, it's like a habitat they've got to create. And it's kind of been like that for me with the gym, and with like from everything to putting a ramp in your house to a accessible bathroom. Like you've just kind of know what you need and then just build that kind of accessible habitat, I guess. And if someone, if there's not something that you need, you might have to work out how to do it yourself. It's not easy, but yeah, it's possible. And don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, like just try and keep pushing forward, because it isn't easy being disabled, but eventually you will get to the place where things start coming together. Like the first few years are really hard, but yeah, like just keep moving forward and try and not think about what you've lost. Try and think about, what you can still do and what you can still achieve. And yeah, it's actually surprising. You'll surprise yourself, I think, in time. Just give yourself time.